They want us to pay for our own raisins that we grew. We have to buy them back.
It's hurting the small grower, and I believe that the government wants, by doing these things, is trying to get rid of all the small growers.
Don't mess with what we produce. Don't take a percentage. Let us do what we want with our own crop.
Marvin and Laura Horne make raisins. They've done it for more than 3 decades. They plant the seeds, water the crops, tie the vines, harvest the fruit, and sun-dry the grapes in paper trays. They even package and market the finished product.
My wife has been on the farm all of her life. She's a 4th-generation farmer. We were married in 1968. We bought our first farm.
My parents bought their first 20 acres on their own, away from my grandparents, and we literally, the 3 of us, did all the farm work. I went out and I tied vines, I rolled trays, we picked grapes, we did everything, and I just hate to see it just given away. It means a lot to me.
Every single raisin produced and sold in the U.S. is raised, dried, and harvested by California farmers like the Hornes. The state is famous for its raisins worldwide. But every year, something strange happens to California's raisin farmers. The government seizes a portion of their harvest and doesn't pay them a cent for it.
It was a theft. The reserve was nothing but highway robbery. As it evolved, as all organizations evolved into a bureaucracy, a few people get in control of it and they mastermind it for their benefit, not for the benefit of the farmer.
The government calls it a marketing order. It's a vestige of old Depression-era price controls intended to keep crop prices high enough for farmers to be guaranteed a steady annual income. First, elected members of something called the Raisin Administrative Committee decide what raisin prices should be. At harvest time, the USDA forces farmers to set aside a reserve of raisins that cannot be sold, hence driving up raisin prices. Later, the raisin packing companies can sell the raisins from the reserve pool overseas at dirt cheap prices set by the government, or funnel them into government school lunch programs at low or no cost. The packers make money, the schools are happy, but the farmers make next to nothing. Farmers were always supposed to get some money back from the confiscated raisins, but as profit margins on the reserves dwindled over the years, so did payments to the farmers. It got so bad that in 2003, raisin farmers received $0 in return for the 47% of the crop that had been taken from them.
When that 47%, I couldn't manage anymore with that. Either I had to go borrow money, because everything from my grandfather was paid. And I had to go borrow money. You borrow money, you never get out of it, you're dead. So I sold the 2 20-acre pieces just to survive.
There are already farmers that have lost their land, and that's no getting it back. You can't work for a whole year and then give 47% of what you made away and still plan on keeping that business afloat.
The Hornes had had enough. Instead of handing their crop over to politically connected packers, they began packing and selling their own raisins, and they refused to hand any of it over to the USDA. And that's when the government cracked down.
They took their original inspection reports and made an estimate. Well, this is how many raisins you owe us, because you packed these many raisins, and you got to pay us. And in addition to that, we're going to fine you because you didn't give them to us. We're facing still around $700,000 in fines. Probably with interest and everything, close to $1.5 million.
Unable to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines, the Hornes and other small farmers banded together to fight the USDA in court. Representatives from the USDA and the Raisin Administrative Committee declined to participate in this video.
The raisin marketing order is diabolical.
Brian Layton is a former federal prosecutor turned defense attorney who is fed up with what he saw as the government's overzealous enforcement of farming regulations.
They were filing complaints against farmers for violating prorate in oranges, not complying with the nectarine, peach, and plum marketing or anything. What are you guys doing? You're not doing anything important. What do you leave the farmers alone? What is this?
Layton took the Horne's case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court after the Ninth Circuit decided that the case before them was a matter of unpaid fines and not a constitutional issue.
They turned around and ruled against us, said no takings. It would be one thing if USDA marched onto the Horne's property and took 47% of their crop. But they didn't do that. All they did is say, if you're going to sell them, we own 47% of them. Well, it's a taking.
The Fifth Amendment says that private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. The Hornes argued that because the government took their property, they had a right to be paid for it. But the government said that they never physically took the Hornes' property and were simply fining them for disobeying farming regulations.
Property rights are bundles of rights. The ability to possess, keep, give away, sell, ownership. When they take title to your raisins, you can do none of that.
In a 9-0 ruling, the Supreme Court decided that the Hornes did have a legitimate takings case. And now, after nearly a decade, the Ninth Circuit will hear the case and decide whether or not the USDA's actions constitute a taking of property.
Now we're off and running. Now they have to decide it. And if they decided against us, we just know the Supreme Court's going to take it again. Because they just thought this was just crazy. 47% of your crop?
Don't mess with what we produce. Don't take a percentage. Let us do what we want with our own crop. I don't think they have a right to tell us what we have to do with it.
I didn't choose to fight. All I chose to do was pack and market my own raisins. They're the ones that picked the fight. USDA and the Raisin Administrative Order picked the fight, not me.